Well, there you have it, folks. I'm going to double check my audio. Yes, audio is working. It was 5 earlier, so we lost one earlier. My name is Todd Klassy. This is the Making Photos Live podcast where we never make mistakes. We strive to be the most perfect live podcast anywhere on YouTube. That is our goal. And so if you pay attention, there will be very few mistakes that ever occur on this podcast. Tonight, we're changing the format a little bit, as I'm going to be doing probably nonstop until I find the sweet spot for what we're going to do. The way I'm going to try to do things going forward is I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a photo. I'll provide a Photoshop tip or technique that doesn't need to necessarily have to have Photoshop to work. There's lots of free available photo editing softwares that are out there, software apps and software programs that will work. So we're not going to use something that's necessarily specific to Photoshop, but I'll give you a quick tip. We're going to talk about Google Photos on a weekly basis, and it's my way of kind of promoting and encouraging people to use the software because it's very powerful. I'm a professional photographer, and I think it's just as powerful for people who are professional photographers as it is amateur photographers. We're going to go through my famous slash Reddit critiques, and I'll have a photograph at the end where I tell a little bit of story about how I made the photograph. So without further, by the way, I'm doing broadcasting live tonight from the comfort of a Holiday Inn Express hotel because I have a photo shoot tomorrow. So I don't have the luxury of having a second monitor with me, which means the transitions will be a little rough, but hopefully you'll forgive me in the process. So you'll see my OBS software that'll pop up as I make transitions, but it's me getting the habit of doing things correctly as we go forward. So without further ado, we'll talk a little bit about Photoshop. So what I was going to talk about tonight is I get a question a lot about how do I make my blues and my sky so blue. One way you can do it is by never having to use Photoshop at all. And as we kind of discussed last week, if you're a photographer and you do a lot of photograph work outside, one of the best things you can do, smartest things you can do is buy a polarizing filter. And you can get those even for cell phone cameras. You can get them for compact or point and shoot cameras. Any camera you can get polarizing filters that allow you to create a much deeper blue sky. And they work best early in the morning when the sun first comes up, late in the day when the sun first goes down, and at midday when the sun is high in the sky. And the reason that is because, as I mentioned last week, polarizing filters work when you're at work best when you're at a 90-degree angle from the sun. So if you think about if the sun is at due east when it's rising in the sky on the first day of spring, then you can make photographs that have a nice deep blue sky with your filter, photographing to the north and to the south, because you'd be at a 90-degree angle from the sun. Likewise, at the end of the day, if the sun was due west, you'd be able to shoot south and shoot north because you'd be at 90-degree angle of the sun. And when the sun is at high noon, high above you, you'd be able to shoot in 360 degrees and have deep blue skies and super whites. So that's one of the things you can do it. But in the absence of that, when you make photos, your meter on your camera will sometimes meter off the object and not the sky, or vice versa. And you can flush out or you make your skies look less than thrilling than they really were on that particular day. That's very common with digital photography. Professional photographers will do it just like amateur photographers. The difference is that we don't usually share with people how to make your skies more blue. Well, in the world of Photoshop, and again, every photo editing software has the ability to do this. So if you don't have Photoshop, if you're not willing to pay the $10 per month, keep in mind that you can definitely accomplish this with most other photo editing software packages. But in Photoshop, I like to go and use the Camera Raw filter. This is where I do most of my edits. Now, if you're not willing to spend this $10 per month, you can also go buy Photoshop Elements for like $100, and it comes with Adobe Camera Raw. And this is where I do most of my edits. And if you go to the area where you can edit colors, you can change the hues, the saturations, and the luminance. And luminance means how dark it is or how light it is. In this case, I'll take the blues and I'll move it all the way over to the right, as far and to the point where I like it. Now, I can really, make this a dramatic effect and go way over to the left. This looks fake. I don't like to do that. I'll go somewhere in between, somewhere about here. And I like where that blue is, and you can see that, compared to where it was, much better, much different. Now, the other thing you want to do is also change the color on the aquas, or on some software packages, this will be called your cyans. And because the cyans tend to be in the lighter areas, not the darker areas. So here, if you move this to the left by making it darker, if you look on the bottom, you may not be able to see it, but this area down here got a little darker as well. And so if you change your aquas and your blues and just making them darker without changing your saturation. Saturation can make things really look fake. I don't like to use the saturation adjustment at all. I like to just change the darkness. And then you can go in and you can change the hue a little bit. I like to make mine a little more cyan. I move this to the left. I like to make my blues a little bit lighter in color rather than less purple and more like light blue. And voila, that's how you do it. Now, in Photoshop itself, another technique is to make an adjustment layer called a selective color adjustment layer. If you grab the blues, again, by moving your blacks to the right and taking away the magentas and the yellows, you can make it more blue. And again, same thing with the cyans. Make it more black, take away the blues and the magentas, and you can make your sky more blue. It's not as blue as it is using your Adobe Camera Raw filter, but roughly the same things can be accomplished. So that, in essence, is how you make skies blue in your photo editing software, and anybody can do this. And if it's one of the most basic, fundamental techniques to learn in the world of Photoshop. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit now about Google Photos. Now, some of you remember Google Picasa. Google Picasa was a software program that Google came out with, I don't know, 10 years ago, I'm guessing. It became relatively popular. It had lots of bells and whistles, but for the most part, it was kind of confusing. People didn't really take to it, and they basically stopped supporting it about, I don't know, 4 years ago, I'm guessing. And they came out with a new product, and quietly they came out with a new product. It was called Google Photos. Google Photos is a really handy online storage place for images. It's really convenient. It works super easy and almost works better on a smartphone or a tablet than it does even on a desktop or laptop computer. And what you have here is the basic interface if you're not familiar with it. In future episodes, I'll go into each one of these steps individually so you can master this program if you want. Right now, what you're looking at is at the main page of Google Photos. Now, if I scroll down, you'll be able to see basically all of my high-resolution JPEG images that I have stored on the cloud. And so, like if I'm sitting in the dentist's office and I've got a client that calls up and says, we need to license this particular photo, I will go in and I can grab this photo, I can share it, and provide a link to my clients who want to use that particular photo instantly. I have literally sat in a dentist chair for like an hour and closed large deals for people who want to license photographs. Now that's me. I'm a professional photographer. But for you, if you're say you belong to a social club or an organization or just a large family and you want to swap photos back and forth, or you just want an easy way to share a GIF or a photo or a JPEG on Facebook or any of these other places, you can easily do that too from the comfort of your dentist chair or office or wherever you are. And that's what makes it so powerful. Now, one of the best things is about this software is how easy it is to navigate. Is if you move your slider up and down along the right side here, the date changes. So if I want to go back to my first, day in Montana, I can go back to March 2010, and it'll take a little second to load, and it won't get you precise. You can see here where I was still photographing the University of Wisconsin football team, and then shortly thereafter, I made my very first photograph in the state of Montana. So, you can go back here and search for things that way. Now, another thing that it does, it has very intuitive searching. So in other words, you don't have to tag a photograph for it to know what it's searching for, although it helps. But if I type in the word mountains, it will automatically pull up pictures where there are mountains in the background. Now, it doesn't get precise because technically speaking, these are not mountains. But again, it narrows your search down much more than it would have before. And so it's very intuitive that way. But the other thing you do is you can create albums. And you can create albums, and I make albums based on topic, on subjects, so it's easy for me to search for things. Like for example, I made this one about barns, and this goes back. It ranks them chronologically. So the first photographs that appear at the top are the ones that were taken the longest ago. This particular photograph, for example, if you click the eye icon, it tells you when it was taken. This was taken, 14 years ago. When I was first getting into photography. So the early ones aren't as good as the latter ones, but it has all of my barn photos that are in here. And then if I find one, if I have a duplicate that might be lower resolution, I can archive it. I may want to save it later, but it's not located here. I can go to my menu bar, go to my archive, and pull up any archive photos that I might have. And it's just a great way to organize photos. It's just a super handy feature. And then when you find one that you want to share, you click on the share button. Of course, you can have your entire address book here, but you can also create a link that you can copy and share, and that person and anybody with that link can have access to your particular photo. Or you can automatically, post it to Facebook, Twitter, any number of other places. So it's just really handy in that regard as far as sharing images. And then here on the right, you'll see it'll show you all the albums where it's stored. It'll show you when it was taken, the file name, the size of the image. And then this is important in the world of photography. If you're starting out, it shows your camera settings. And this will help you understand, what works and what doesn't work. So Google Photos, if you're not using it, I encourage you to do so. And by the way, if you let them compress your photo, which most people wouldn't notice any changes to your photo, storing photos on there is free if it's a JPEG. I don't do that. I don't like to have them compress my photos because they're for sale. They're for licensing, and so I have to pay us like $2 a month, I guess. But it's also literally almost a free software package to boot. So with that, I'm gonna double check the side chat. Love old Barnes, Terry, me too. That means that we're now going to talk about my favorite segment, critique photos. And so I'm going to go to my Reddit folder. I'm going to open up the photos we're critiquing today. And then I'm going to go to File Explorer. And I'm going to my desktop and captions. So on the first image, and again, for those unfamiliar with this segment, I want to introduce this correctly. On Reddit, there's a group called Photo Critique, and every week I go through here and I critique their photos with you, and so you can see what I'm looking at when I look at a photograph. Sometimes I get a little snarky, sometimes I even get rude, but hopefully you guys can all pick up something when I go through these photos. This is one, and the gentleman had to ask the question, I shoot this one a couple weeks ago. What do you think? I think it's not a very good photograph. I mean, there are a lot of elements that go into a photograph. One of them is subject. If you don't have a compelling subject, it's hard sometimes to make a good photograph. Now, really good photographers can take even a mundane, boring subject and turn it into something interesting. But here, I know what he was trying to do. He's trying to create a reflection. And again, we all love reflections. But on this particular day, as cloudy it is, when your skies are slate gray like this, it's hard to make a good photograph. And if you're going to go outside and make photographs on days like that, just don't include the sky. It's hard, anytime you include the sky when it's gray and overcast like that, it's hard. I mean, you can do some things in Photoshop to fix that, but for the most part, you're not doing yourself any favors. So, what you photograph and when you photograph it is important. And also here, if it was me, frankly, if you had to shoot this, then this is the crop I would use. Take out all this stuff on top. Take out all this stuff on the bottom. It's just, absolutely unnecessary. Next one is this one. It had the headline, wanted a dramatic silhouette, but I think it's a bit underexposed. Though I did slight editing in Lightroom, I assume that's what LR means, and he gave his photo settings. When an amateur photographer gives their photo settings, that automatically tells a professional photographer that they think that the settings, that if you just get the settings right, you can make a great photograph. And it's just not how it works. Because, if you want to make a great photograph in a particular scene, there's so many other things that go into making a great photograph. Plus, there might be 3, 5, 10, 12 different settings that you could make using the exact same composition that might result in a completely different look to the image. Your camera, your Photoshop, and the tools that you use, and that's your brain, out in the field when you make a photograph, those are all like brushes to a painter. And you're painting an image with everything that you do, with the way you compose a photograph, the way you position a person in a photograph, the settings you use in the camera. Those are just brushes. So in this particular photograph, first of all, it's not a silhouette. A silhouette would mean that he's perfectly black, I assume. That's what he was meaning here. And the sky would be a lot more bright. This is just a horribly underexposed image here. If you look at a histogram, you guys all have these on your camera. Probably never pay attention to them. But you'll notice here, that's a bad one to look at. Let's see if the levels adjustment is any clearer. Yes. Well, it's just the same up here. But you can see these pixels. When you have all these pixels over to the left, that means there's lots of black pixels or dark pixels. When they're way over to the right, that means there are a lot of white pixels. Here, this mountain of pixels is cut. Half of it is off the chart. That means there's lots of solid black in here. That means there's no detail. I can't see strands of hair. I can't see the neck. I can't see leaves on trees. Nothing. I can't see any detail in the sky. Underexposed? Yes, an understatement. And you can't resurrect something like this very easily in Photoshop either. I mean, you can try, but you get all this noise, all this crap, all these artifacts, all this pixelization, and you just, especially on a JPEG, you just can't do it. Here's a photograph. Again, somebody trying to be artsy-fartsy. Said too much foreground, too dark. No, it's the eyes are dark. You probably want to go in and grab the eyes, because the eyes are the window to the soul, and make those lighter. There, I opened up the exposure on the eyes. You don't want to go too far to look fake. You can see where it was and where it is now. Huge difference. But the other thing is, I don't know what this crap is. I mean, I know you're trying to be cute. You're shooting it through probably a fancy window and your front door. The leash gets in the way. You got a post that's coming out of the side of his body. You got a distracting elements in the background. The composition's horrible. Also, when you're shooting down on a pet, it's seldom good. You should get down at the same eye level, get down on your knees and photograph it. Whatever the photographer was trying to accomplish here, it just didn't work. Here's a photograph with the headline. By the way, I'm double checking my chat here to see anything come through. Took a distorted picture of my dad's audio mixer a while ago. I'd love to see what other people think of it. Well, for starters, there's all kinds of noise and crap in here. And second of all, nobody knows what the hell this is. I mean, if you're trying to create an abstract image, okay, I guess. But there's, nobody's going to buy this photograph. So, and if, you have to ask yourself, are you going to spend the money yourself to put that on your wall? Even if you aren't willing to spend the money to put that on your wall, then you probably answered your own question. Here's a photograph for the headline, clicked 2 industrial workers on their fag break. Now, this must have been from England because I think that's where they call cigarettes fags. Here, again, I don't know what they're trying to do here. Trying to be cute, trying to shoot through obstacles and stuff. You don't see any faces. All you see is the hand. Now, if he had zoomed in on just that, image crop, oops, image crop, and now we're going to try to zoom that in. That's not a bad photograph. I try to not get this thing in there because hands are interesting. But the rest of it, sorry, that's a loss. Here is a picture where the gentleman asked, or woman asked, whoever, advice on composition, please. Well, first of all, it's a boring subject. Second of all, what is this pink thing out here? Next, this is somebody, I mean, I don't. First of all, you're not using your lenses right, because here's where a wide-angle lens would come in handy. Because when you have a wide-angle lens, transform, skew, it makes your area in the back become a lot more narrow. I'm kind of duplicating the effect, and the foreground wide, which means you create a bit of a vanishing point on this trail. And so when you have a trail like this, the rule of thirds doesn't work really well where you have it over to the side. You're probably best centering it. But again, you got to ask yourself, why are you photographing this in the first place? It's not a sunny day. The lighting is horrible. I guess that would be a better composition. And then in Photoshop, I would go in and I would grab the trail as best I can. And then I would soften the edge. And I would use an adjustments layer to change so you can accentuate that. And then I would select, reselect, inverse, and I would darken the areas outside of it. Again, because the emphasis is on the trail. But again, it's just a bad photo. Again, would you hang this on your wall? If the answer is yes, then we need to spend a little more time with you, I guess. This one's, I think, is a good shot. I would have done something a little bit better in composition, but advice on window layout at our local museum. I would have used Photoshop to go in and remove this little security camera because it's a distraction. Also, this is a crop. If you want to print it, it's not a very good crop because, I mean, you can make prints this size, but you'll never find frames for a canvas print. You'll never find frames for a frame print. I like to shoot things that are in a 2:3 aspect ratio because that's generally what comes out of your camera. And so I would have probably positioned it more here and more here and more here. Come on, Steve. And then maybe go, I don't know. No, that didn't work. But I would have used a crop like this because it's more. And actually, this is actually a good crop. You position this in the lowest third and the right third, and that's good composition. And here, this is something you can print. You can make prints with this. This is a good crop. The other crop, not so good. But overall, it's a pretty good photo. Next one is titled "Turnip in the City Market." I don't know. Whoever grew these did a pretty good job cleaning them. I'll say that. But again, this is not a. You got all this garbage in here. Either you want to Photoshop that out or whatever. There are more compelling shots at a farmer's market. It takes a long time to find them because you can't handle the produce. I can tell you firsthand. I'm in a process of building a body of work centered around farmers markets. And the best thing to do is to find things that are stacked really close to each other. When you do that, that's how you can get rid of the crap that's in the background. On the like that. When you have an image like this, where you have all this open space, it doesn't make for a very good image. So keep looking around the farmer's market, or ask the seller if they'd stack the things for you. Don't do it yourself, or you get thrown out of the farmer's market. This one has the headline, "Old Shot." I don't know what that means, but it's horrible because the head is out of focus, and that's where the focus should be. You have this thing, this emblem here that's sticking here, and nobody knows what that means. It's just overall, it's underexposed. Hold on a second. It's a very underexposed image. I'm going to open up the shadows a little bit more. This eye here, I'm not sure if I can ever get that perfect exposed. It's just not a very good. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's just not a very good image. Here's another one, new to photography. The colors on this one is good. I like the splash, but again, one of the biggest things that amateurs get wrong is they don't get tight enough to the whatever it is that they're photographing. Image, crop. And then we're going to open up the blacks. Because it's a JPEG, it doesn't offer a lot of latitude, but it's also, the background's also underexposed, and frankly, you want to blur the background. So this is where a lens that has a very large aperture would allow you to blur this background, because this background is just too distracting. You're photographing the right subjects, you're seeing action, but again, there's too much going on in this image to make this interesting for use otherwise. And I think this will be our last one here so we can stay on schedule. This one's called Dreaming. When they're tilted like this is called in the world of motion pictures a canted angle. You can also do it in photography too. But again, I'm not sure why you do it. Now the interesting part here is that this guy has a camera here. That's an expensive Canon camera, and it's kind of a not so good photograph taken here. But again, I don't know. I don't like it when you cut off legs and you don't see the head. I don't understand the point of doing that. And there's no human connection here. There's no face, there's no eyes, there's no hands, there's no skin. It's just I guess I don't understand the point of it. So there's that. And then lastly, note to self to never post photos on Reddit. You know what, Terry? I'm going to do one for you. I'm going to critique my own photograph next, because you'll see that no one critiques my photographs worse than I do. All right? But before I do that, I'm going to go into a little bit of story. This is one that I took in the spring of 2010 when I first got to Montana, and I attended my first branding. And that's when the cowboys go out and they put the mark of the ranch on the calves. And in case some of you might think that that's inhumane, they feel it, but it's not like if you were to do it to a human. And I might remind you that there are certain African American fraternities where they brand themselves, and we have much thinner skin than calves do. It's done because that's the law, state law in all the western states. I think west of Iowa, west of Minnesota, they all require ranchers to brand their calves. So they have to go round up all the calves and they have to brand them. Now, calves are lightning fast. And this particular day, and I had never witnessed branding in my life. In fact, when somebody told me, hey, Todd, we're branding this weekend, you want to come out? I'm like, you guys still do that? Because I thought that was something that was just in the movies. But yes, they still do. And so I went out and I just had a heck of a time that day photographing all the action, because it was just unlike anything I'd ever seen. So I'm quite literally out in the middle of nowhere when this scene unfolds. A calf separated itself from the herd, and this particular cowboy took off on his horse at full gallop, and it was just a wonderful scene. I can't tell you how many times I've photographed this photo. I've had lots of artists, painters, who have mimicked this scene, copied it for their paintings, which I'm not sure how I feel about that. But again, this calf was in full trot, and the trick here was that they were moving very fast, and so I had to move my camera with the action, which means I had to get the shutter speed just right so I could freeze the action, and that takes some practice. And the way I used to do that was by sitting along the highway and panning on like vehicles that drove by at different speeds to kind of figure out what camera settings worked at certain speeds. And that's how I got familiar with how to do that. So here, this was a scene that I shot, and it's proven quite popular now. And that's the story behind the photograph. It was just my first day on a branding. It was unbelievable. I went up to the rancher afterwards, and I thanked him profusely for letting me come out and photograph. And he was like, "Why do you keep thanking me?" And I'm like, "There are people back east that would pay thousands of dollars to come out and experience what I got to experience for free today." And it's true. It's an unbelievable experience. It's pure Americana, whether you agree with it or not. It's what we are, and it's just an adventure. I mean, it's just amazing to be around these men and women who are, scraping by to make things ends meet so they can put food on the plates of people all around the world. It's just an interesting thing to experience. Anyhow, I'm gonna critique my own photograph. Now, in Photoshop, first thing that jumps out at me is I should have taken out this strap. This strap serves no purpose. It just sits there. It distracts. And I probably could have cleaned up. There's also something sticking off the end of here. I argued at the time about these bushes, what to do. And I left them. And I also argued what to do about these cows. Now, the best thing would have been if I had shown up. Of course, I stumbled onto the scene. But I should have used a 400 millimeter lens instead of a 200 millimeter lens, which is the only thing I was armed with telephoto wise that day. If I had done that, I would have made a better scene because it would have been a tighter crop. And this is more dramatic because you can see, then I'd be able to see more of the cowboy's face, more of the face of the calf. If it had been done even differently. I might have even gotten even tighter and taken out the distracting cows in the background and could have put all the focus on what was going on here. But because I was only armed with a 200 millimeter lens, which I learned for later years not to do, it meant that sure I could crop this, but there wouldn't be enough pixels to do anything with it. You wouldn't be able to make very large prints. You couldn't photograph it large, put the photograph large into a magazine for like a 2-page spread. There just wasn't going to be enough pixels there for it to look good. So I was stuck, unfortunately, with this crop, which was already cropped down quite a lot. Also, it was because I didn't know these things happened like this. I just wasn't prepared. I mean, I had to shoot on the fly. Now I'm a little more prepared. I actually go to these brandings with 2 cameras. One for getting good telephoto shots and one for, wide angle shots. And again, I would have picked my backgrounds better where I stood. Here, this was against a large butte. It's called McCann Butte. And because of it, there's no sky. And this would have looked better, if there had been some sky in here. And if I had just positioned myself, moved my feet over 100 feet over into this position over here, or actually more aptly, I think more over here, 100 feet off camera over here, I would have got sky. I wouldn't have had the butte in here, and it would have made a much more dramatic photograph. So live and learn. So again, that's me critiquing my own stuff. So with that said, I'm going to look to the, I guess he was dreaming of owning that camera. A lot of people do, Terry. People put way too much emphasis into cameras and gear. And while it's important and it's fun, if you're a techie, it doesn't really make the photograph. In fact, there are some channels out there where they'll take a well-known professional photographer and they'll hand them like a Barbie 2-megapixel toy camera. And they'll say, go make good photographs with this. Any good professional photographer can take any crappy camera and make good photos. So we put too much emphasis. Now, good cameras make our jobs easier. Good lenses make photos sharper. And they make like I just showed you with the last photograph, we can zoom in and make our jobs easier. But at the end of the day, like I said a couple of weeks ago, nobody goes up to a carpenter and says, wow, those are nice cabinets. You must have a really nice hammer. It's only photographers that they go up to and they say, wow, that's a great photograph. You must have a really nice camera. So I guess that's kind of the difference. So that being said, that's all I got for today. This is kind of how we're going to try running these formats going forward. Although I'll be back in my office. Typically, this summer I'll be out and about a little bit more. I'll probably get a portable monitor so I can, make these transitions a little bit easier, a little more seamless if I'm out and about. But this is kind of how I think we're going to run the format going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. And again, if any of you have questions, feel free to email me or contact me at toddklassy.com. Be sure to like and subscribe this channel if you haven't done so already. And also check me out on Facebook at facebook.com/Todd Klassy Photography. I'm also on Instagram and I'm also on LinkedIn. So hope to see you also there as well. Otherwise, that's all I have for the Making Photos Live podcast. See you back here again next week, next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern for another fun-filled, perfect podcast, inside joke.